Yeah, let's start.
You ain't walking on.
I have a few minutes after, so let's call a meeting in order.
Where you got?
Yeah, she will run 152.
Yeah.
So if we can get the attention,
Yeah, I talked to him yesterday.
if we can get
We
everybody's
are
attention.
recording.
Yeah, so we are recording.
Okay, okay. We'll start. Just as a, do we recognize all the people on Zoom? Are there any guests?
Looks like they're all analysts.
All the insiders, okay.
Yes, we have no attendees.
Okay, I just wanted. Okay, so call the meeting order of Finance and Admin Committee on August 12th, for Water Management District. It is a Zoom meeting, so I'll take college of that. So roll call, please.
Director Paul,
Here.
Director Edwards.
Here.
Chair Riley.
Here,
All members are present.
good. So there are no comments of the public, but if there are any public out there, you got to raise your hand, but I don't think there are any.
There are none.
There are none. Okay. Onward with action items. Okay, item 1 is prior minutes from June the 10th. Any member or anybody want to comment on anything? I made some notes here, but I don't know where my notes
I
are.
was not at that meeting, so I will remain quiet and not vote.
Okay, well, I'll move approval.
I'll second it.
Roll call, please. Oh, I don't need to do that because we're all here.
This is an in-person meeting, so.
That's right. Okay, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions?
One, me,
Okay, that passes 2-0 with 1 abstention. Item number 2 is the recommendation of our contract for TM processing controls for the ASR well turbidity.
Yeah, we have the
We
district
have some
engineer with
information.
us.
Thank you.
hello.
Hi, welcome, Maureen.
Oh, now it has a private one. It's a good thing we want to hire this process control group. So as you're all aware, we had a turbidity event and we're rehabbing ASR1 and ASR2. Staff recommends installing a turbidity analyzer that will read the turbidity of the incoming injectate and shut down injection upon a signal of high turbidity. The turbidity analyzer that we're speccing is very high tech, very sensitive. It reads down to 0.002, what are called NTUs, which is a long phrase for the engineering units. They read turbidity. The eye can only see down to 5. So we're going 1,000 times more sensitive than what the eye can see. Additionally, this is going to get integrated with the process control of the plant such that when you get the turbidity hit, the injection will automatically shut down at the injection wells. So it's a specialty services contract. We did a request for qualifications this spring to get qualified candidates to execute some of the work we wanted to do this year. TMPCC, TM Processing Controls, was selected. They've been in business, I believe, since December of 2015. They work in the area and are highly recommended. We met at site, kind of looked around, what's there, what do we need to do, where do we need to install it, and the quote came back at 50, well, without the 10% contingency, the quote with the 10% contingency, the quote came in at $57,748.56. That exceeds our budget line item, which was $50,000. However, within that same account, we have a design budget, and we could transfer the $7,748.56 from that budget item to the turbidity analyzer. So staff is requesting approval of a contract in the amount which includes a 10% contingency of $57,748.56 with TM Processing Controls. Are there any questions?
I have a couple.
Please,
And I have a bunch.
please.
Okay, go ahead.
So is there ongoing monitoring involved?
Yes, it's a continuous analyzer.
So what Does this contract cover the installation and testing?
It covers the specifications, drawings. We'll have to meet with Caliam because it's going to integrate through their SCADA system. So we've got to be very closely communicating. And then you get the analyzer. As you can imagine, if it's going to read down to 0.02 NTUs, you don't plug up. You don't connect it to any kind of water source. You purge it. There are a number of very specialized things that have to be done as well. The power, it's a 12 and 24 volt DC, including to the solenoid of what's called the clay valve that we're also going to have to purchase so that it can automatically shut down. So then they put all those things in the field, connect them, and test them to make sure that everything's communicating as it should and nothing's getting harmed in the process. It's not an expensive
Yeah.
deal, and we want to make sure it's done right so that we don't void our warranties.
So the ongoing monitoring, maintenance, troubleshooting, whatever else has to be done will be a separate cost, separate from this?
Once it's installed and functioning, then operations take over, we take over. Prior to startup of injection, we'll run through our tests, and if anything's weird at that point, we call the vendor under warranty.
Thank you.
So turbidity. I did a little research on turbidity, but it was about 8 months ago, and I've forgotten it all.
Oh,
So I'd like a little help on what that means.
it's basically the stuff that won't dissolve, even though you can't see it. They're very, very small, sometimes colloidal particles. And turbidity is a measure, really, you can think of it of the lack of clarity in water. It's the lack of transparency in water. The stuff that plugs a well is also not visible to the naked eye. So if you remember when this all happened, Caliam was like, no, this turbidity event happened in the valley. There's no way. We weren't getting any complaints. And speaking with my experience with Pure Water Monterey, the base project, they were getting hit with a very fine remaining silt that we couldn't see with our eye. That was coming from the fact that the water stabilizer was powdered versus liquid. So turbidity, you can look at water, oh, I'm not going to drink that. That's really turbid. There's also stuff in there that you can't see. And that's what the analyzer is going to measure. Is
So it's not bubbles itself. It's just, no, they're items.
No,
They're
it's
particles in the
undissolved-
water.
undissolved particles, you bet.
So if we used to do testing to 5, units, whatever the units are, to now going 0.002, something like that, does that mean that it will trigger more often than it did in the past?
And that's something that we in the operations group have to figure out. At what point do we really want to kill this? The turbidity for drinking waters, I'm confident it's got to be higher than 5. It's going through some old pipes. So we're not going to kill it at 0.02 because that wouldn't be sustainable.
But you still have to determine at what point is it going to be 1 or 2 or 0.1 or something or other, somewhere in that range.
Exactly. And that's going to be a considerable amount of testing before we put the analyzer live to see what works for us.
Who makes the final decision? Is that a joint thing with Caliam or?
I think MPWMD will, based on the operations and maintenance agreement, we're in charge of operations of injection. And that seems consistent with our agreement.
So I'm curious about, the statement was but prior to 2021, there were no real findings of problems. Is there any particular thing that happened and that kind of generated turbidity?
A whole lot more infrastructure, new infrastructure, more flexible. Water goes a lot of different ways through a lot of new pipes. And
But that's not changing turbidity, or is it?
well, when you reverse flow through a pipe, you can absolutely, the water comes in and scale lays down, and it's always getting moved along in one direction. And that scale is not, perfectly flat, perfectly like even ice isn't flat. So if water's going to come back over it, it's going to break little bits off and
In
things you may
the
not
other
see.
direction.
Yes.
Right, and that's the problem of cleaning pipes, right? I mean, pumping out the system as you go the reverse and then everything gets clouded up and you got to put people on warning or notice or don't use it for the next 24 hours or something like that.
Yeah, you purge it for all new pipes. You purge for quite a while until they're running clear and you're getting good turbidity readings.
So we might be in a new era where this interruption may be more common.
The interruption in terms of the turbidity shutting the process down, which would actually be a good thing versus what we're doing right now, which is a lot of work, or there's going to be changes in operations that are potentially going to create turbidity events. That is going to happen more often, for sure.
And then the judgment call about whether to shut any system down still is to be made, but more likely to be presented as a decision more often.
I think we will configure the analyzer to shut down at a turbidity that we're comfortable with given our experience. So it's going to have to be a level above normal background turbidity, that just happens in drinking water. The point's going to have to be higher than that, but not as high as, we've flowed water through or there some filter wash water made it into the system. Excuse me.
So if somebody were to complain, would the complaint likely show up on the Cal-Am side? A customer would complain because of,
If a customer had
cloudiness?
visible turbidity, absolutely.
And that's why when we had this non-spec water event at ASR, Cal-Am hadn't received any customer complaints. But when you kind of analyze their system, there are very few customers in between the Begonia iron removal plant and ASR. I mean, they don't have a whole bunch
Oh.
of connections. It comes up the hill through Tehama, shoots down the hill. It's not going to anyone's home. Connects over here at the intersection of 218 and Highway 68. And then it heads out to General Jim Moore Boulevard. And so you weren't going to get a customer complaint. You might have up the valley, and I think we did hear that they did have a couple of customer complaints at the time about the water quality when this was going on. Go figure.
well, yeah, but that helps explain why the exposure to the turbidity was pretty small.
But when they tested the two new pump stations, so you remember they put a pump station at Rancho San Carlos Road, and then they put a pump station in down by the Forest Lake tanks. So a year ago, February, they tested those. That reversed the flow from basically from Pacific Grove up into the Carmel Valley. So they issued notices to all the customers that you might end up having turbidity coming out of your faucet. And that goes to what she described earlier. When you reverse the flow,
Sure.
you pick stuff up or break scale off. And
Mhm. Well, that's good to know. Good to have kind of an early warning system. It's important to have. Okay, I have no more questions. Alan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have 4 ASR wells. The district on what? 1 or 2? Okay. 3 and 4 Cal-Am, and I think if I remember right, I thought it was 4, but in your report, you got 3 is being a production well now for Cal-Am. Okay, this system would go on 1 and 2.
Yes.
Have we talked about Cal-Am bringing up something like this for 3 and 4? Because no need if 1 and 2 shut down, that means 3 and 4 or 4 or it's automatically shut down.
No, We
No.
can shut down 1 and 2 injection, and 3 and 4 will continue in production without interruption.
Okay, so do this make, it makes sense for us, but should we be telling Cal-Am, you need to get this?
When they go back into injection, because that's when you're shoving all that turbid water
Right,
into the
right, well, I
formation.
understand that.
It'll be fairly straightforward. I know on one of our wells, we needed a particular item on a valve. This is going to be going into their SCADA system. So they'll already have that signal at the middle school site where 3 and 4 are.
Okay,
And then it would just be a matter of making sure the valves that would shut down injection do have the little switch that makes them automated. And there are always extra conduits around. They should be able to just run a little electrical signal out there for shutdown.
okay, thank you. Is this going to be charged against Cal-Am? Or is this going to be the district dime?
This is on the district's dime because it is not, it's a new thing. It's within, it's an alteration of an existing facility, which would come under capital, which is ours. It
Okay.
isn't, oh, we broke it. If we break something, or if a well plugs up and we have to rehab it, that's the maintenance stuff they pay for.
Okay, and I think my final question is, we got to continue to see, this will go on 1 and 2, right?
Yes.
Okay, I think that's it. I think it might come back to me before we take the vote, but good job on the report.
Thank you.
So, Cal-Am just only got 1 ASR well that's, we putting water in.
We're not injecting in either 3 or 4 at this point.
Oh, we're not?
Right.
Okay,
They've turned them into a couplet of production wells.
so 1 and 2,
Yeah, and when they put the mercury treatment in at 4, they basically made 4 non-functional for injection. It's called a Baskey valve that's no longer there. So someday, maybe 2 years from now, we will endeavor to return those 2 wells to both directions, injection and extraction.
okay. That's it,
Thank you.
I'm clear.
Yeah, I'll entertain a motion for approval, but I do have a comment after we vote on this subject.
I move to approve the
I'm,
staff recommendation.
I'll second it. Now you can talk before we vote.
Doesn't matter about the vote. It won't matter on the vote. It's just a carryover issue. Okay, all in favor, say aye. please.
Aye.
Aye. No abstentions. Carries 3-0. My question is, in the narrative report, you go to the pennies. Dollars plus 56 cents, dollars plus 69 cents, dollars plus. Now, I'm not a big fan of pennies in reports. So I'm just wondering what's the nature of just rounding off to a number, using whole numbers, never going to a penny, still getting the authority we need, but save that kind of accounting system and recording system. I just think it's useless information. And I just as soon find a way to simplify it. That's my question.
Since you're looking at me, I agree with that. And, you know, accountants think in a certain way and engineers might think in a different way. And, you know, precision, do we need that level of precision while putting together a contract? The answer is probably no. We can round it to the next dollar. And I guess that's something that we could do unless, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Round it all up, but we're only going, a whole quarter or something, or 50 cents.
Well,
And
what,
the auditors will be okay with this?
I'm pretty sure if the contract amount is rounded and that's going to carry forward everywhere. So, yeah.
oh, I hear you, George, but that plaque over there on that wall was talking about transparency. I like to have my numbers like you got them right now. That on the way the public would know that's how much it costs, because you're going to come back to me and you're going to ask for that $5,000. I hope you don't, but every contract we had, we put a contingency in there. So I just like out of transparency, keep it like you got it.
Well, you
But-
sound like an auditor, not a
Yeah,
not a transparent issue.
I know, but we do good by keeping it like that. You know, through the auditors and stuff, because if we round it up and this and that, they're gonna use the exact number.
Right. And to clarify what I was saying, the quote from the contractor we could say, Mr. Contractor or Miss Contractor, please round it to one decimal, to the next dollar amount and give us your quote. And then that would carry forward. So it's not like we are taking their number and changing it.
Okay, well,
That's what I was thinking.
because I like to see that paper with that exact number on there. Then, okay, we're rounding up, we're rounding down, we're rounding up. How much are we paying? So the public know exactly how much we paying. You know, that's me. So,
I totally hear you. There's also the concept of a materiality, which auditors use. And at what point is a number or a financial information material, and at what point would it change the decision making? So that's also something to consider.
Right.
I totally get your argument on transparency.
Yeah,
though.
yeah, and to the public, you know,
Yeah.
everything 57,000. No, everything ain't 57,000. Everything $57,748.56. So
Okay, well,
that's just my thought.
keep an open mind.
Yeah, think hard on it.
I had a comment which was like a semi-answer perhaps to Director Riley's comment about the turbidity. And I was like, maybe there are injection standards for turbidity that the district knows, and we would follow those injection standards. And so, you know, there is perhaps a standard to follow at what level of unit that turbidity needs to be when it's injected in the ground. So.
And that'll be cranked into your discussion about how you set that trigger point. Yeah. Okay. No, that sounds good. I thought turbidity was air bubbles based on what I little remembered.
It can look like it, you know, when it's coming out of the faucet, absolutely. Yeah, because you basically can't see through the water.
No, well, this is good. And this gets a little bit to my point about things we need to understand a little more, perhaps. Okay, thanks. Into that comment or matter. Item number 3 is recommendation to authorize a lease for copy machines.
Good afternoon, Chair again. So this item, I'll take this item. This is to authorize leasing of 3 new photocopy machines for the next 5 years. So currently the district uses Canon photocopiers. They're considered the top of line in their industry. And we have fancier copier downstairs that's used for printing committee packets and board packets. And then we have 2 upstairs. Those copiers are meeting the district's needs at this point, and we just wanted to get enter into another lease for the next 5 years. So what we went out to our existing vendor, and then we also went out to another local vendor. They both gave us prices in the range of about $800 a month to lease the same machines. However, staff is recommending entering into a cooperative purchasing agreement using the National Association of State Procurement Officials, or NASPO contract, which will be for $490 a month. So that's a 40% reduction than what we are paying currently. And we are getting this pricing because NASPO contracts are competitively sourced, and they combine the purchasing power of multiple public jurisdictions. And some of these are really big, like states. So we're getting this really very competitive price for our current machines. And that's what staff is proposing, that we enter into a contract using NASPO. So our current vendor, there's a parent company called Kyocera. Kyocera holds the NASPO contract. So instead of having a contract with the current vendor, we'll have a contract with Kyocera, their parent company, and use the NASPO pricing. So staff is just recommending a new 5-year contract for $29,424 with no decimals for a 5-year lease. So that's staff recommendation.
Thank
Really,
you
this
for
is a great-
finding that cost saving.
It's a great service. Go ahead, Alvin.
Yeah. Are we going to be getting an upgrade with this? If you get new ones or redoing the contract, are you thinking about or thought about getting upgraded copier machines to keep us up to date or,
Yeah. So the model numbers, 7570, that's like 70 pages per minute. That's a higher end copier machine that we have right here next to the board's clerk. And then we have two other ones, C3530 upstairs. Those are both meeting our current needs, but if, let's say, the district were to expand in the future, then we would go out and do a new solicitation for new machines.
Well, my thoughts is, I don't mind this, but 5 years from now, let's look for an upgrade. Okay, if we're gonna be doing this, this would be 10 years of this, what we got. But in the future, let's look for an upgrade, and we might have to pay a few more dollars or a few more pennies on it. But I look at that. So think about that.
Will do.
Because if you're gonna keep the same thing, I might as well own them.
That's an important consideration. So we looked at owning the machines versus leasing the machines.
Mhm.
And if something goes, let's say we own a machine, if something happens, then we have to go back and purchase it. And there are certain warranty considerations. But with the lease, if it doesn't work out, they would swap it with a new machine. And the difference between owning versus leasing wasn't that high. And so we just went ahead with the leasing
Okay,
option.
as long as we looked at both of them, but let's keep thinking upgrade,
Sure.
keeping up with the times. Okay, thank you. I'll move for approval.
Recommending to the board that the board
Yeah,
approve. it.
I'll move
Yeah, I second.
Any other comments, Karen? I have none.
No, I just want to thank Nishio for looking for cost savings like this. Very helpful.
Yeah, I was just pleased to learn about it. I didn't know that those kind of, they should exist. They do exist. I didn't know they existed. So it's good to hear. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 3-0. Okay, item number 3, then we go to item number 4, which is a report.
Yes, item
Treasurer's
4.
report.
Yes, item 4 is the monthly treasurer's report for June 2024. And I'll just provide some high level statistics. We started the month of June with 27.8 million.
Right, do we have this for the?
Yes, do you want me to
Yeah,
bring
put
it
it up
up?
for the public now. I
Sure.
talked about transparency, let them see everything.
Absolutely. I'll have to bring it up on my screen. Second. Got this before the meeting. Sure. So, can you bring it up because I don't have connectivity for some reason? Just the treasurer's report exhibit A.
If you can't find it, we'll
No,
go on, but be
Yes.
prepared at regular board meeting to bring it up if I ask for it, so the public can see it.
absolutely. I hope that's easy enough to see on the screen.
Yeah, I can see it, but we can't make it any bigger.
There we go.
Yeah,
Yes.
so they can squint their eyes and look at it. I got one. Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So looking at the column where it says MPWMD total, the beginning balance is the total of our cash and investments on June 1 of this year. So that's 27.8 million. We begin the month with that number and ended, if you can scroll down, you'll be able to see the totals. So we ended the month with 30.8 million. So district received fees and deposits about 5.2 million, made cash disbursements of about 2.6 million, which included rebate payments of 19,807. And most of the deposits that you see here are related to deposits for the Pure Water Monterey water sales. And if you look at Exhibit B, you'll see a listing of the checks, all the checks for the month of June, and then Exhibit C provides a detailed breakdown of the revenues and expenditures. These are unaudited, obviously, unaudited statements for the month, and we continue to receive a few invoices, which are stragglers for the year. Yeah, 4C. Yeah. So what I wanted to highlight on 4C is that we have remained below budget, below adopted budget for the fiscal year so far. If you look at our personal expenditures, we are at about 97% of our personal expenditures. For services and supplies, we are at around 92%. And then in terms of our operating revenues, we are slightly above what we budgeted. So we are about 101.5% higher for the year. Now, the biggest difference is in project reimbursements. This is for the Pure Water Monterey expansion project. Those reimbursements are dependent on how far along those projects are. And so that revenue and those expense numbers are going to be fairly subdued. But on the operating side, we have remained under budget on the expenditures, and we are right on target on the revenues. So that's the good news. And happy to take any questions.
I have a couple of questions. On your first sheet, your fourth entry was interest received.
Yes.
Is that the interest on LAIF and all those other?
No, this is interest on bank CDs. We have, so it's under multi-bank securities. These are,
Okay.
CDs from various banks that we
Right.
have. And LAIF interest is received every quarter, and we haven't received that yet, but we should be for.
But it would show up here if.
It would show up here when we receive
Okay,
it.
okay, because I did see the 18,985 over here in the investment income
Yes.
page.
Yes.
And then just to follow the other side of that, the very next page had debt service interest. And I mean, it's not much money, and that's not my point. My point is, what's in that category?
Sorry, I need to see. What are you looking at Exhibit B?
I'm looking at the last page, C, the last page of C. And it's in that last category in the middle. It says debt service interest. It's peanuts, but I mean,
Oh,
I'm
that
curious about
might.
the category. That's
Yeah, I think I'll have to check. That seems like an appeal payment that could be in the interest category. I'll have to see if that's correctly accounted, if it's in the right line item. I remember having this discussion based on a question that Director Paul had, that $75 is an appeal fee. So we might have to take a look at that and correct that.
I don't know.
It's categorized correctly.
It's a personal story to me. My son told me over the weekend, we had a big family thing, and somebody went around the room, what was your goal when you were at college age? What was your dream job when you were
Mhm.
college age? My son surprised the hell out of me. He said, I want to be an arbitrage manager between sectors of the world, like South Asia versus Europe or something like that.
Wow.
And I thought, it stunned me, but it got to me thinking, arbitrage. How much do we do in terms of arbitrage? That's kind of the source of the curiosity.
Sure.
And,
Yeah, I'm glad you
Yeah.
pointed that out because I'll look at that and if that is not accounted correctly, then we'll make the change in the final printouts that are on the website.
this was not a question about the numbers, just what was in that category. Okay.
So how are we doing with money market and everything? Are we on time, on schedule, or did that hit last Monday affect us with the stocks and things?
All right. So our operating cash is not in the stock market. CalPERS can invest their assets in stocks. We can't because this is a treasury portfolio and there are limitations according to government codes. And so we have the triple goals of liquidity and making sure, I think liquidity is number one, and then we can't lose principal. And so if you look at our investment policy, which is the next staff report, we can't invest in stocks. That's the short answer, and it's not affecting us at all.
Okay, good. Okay,
If there are no other questions, the motion to recommend adoption to the board.
I so move.
I second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. 3-0.
So liquidity, safety, and yield. That's what I was trying to get at. Those are our triple goals.
Item number 5 is an action item, is changing our list or adding to the list of acceptable investment options.
Yes, so item 5 is to consider inclusion of the California Liquid Asset Securities System, also called California Class, in the system, in the district's portfolio. And this item came about because several meetings back, I think Chair Riley brought it up. And the recommendation was for staff to look into this program. And that's what we have done in the staff report. And while we were at it, we also looked at a complementary program called the California Asset Management Program, or CAMP. And both are similar programs. And currently the district has all its investments in the local agency investment fund, which is managed by the state treasurer's office. Both CLASS and CAMP are programs comparable to LAIF. And I think the best way to look at them is to look at this next slide, which compares the three programs across a series of parameters. And the two programs, CLASS and CAMP, they offer a different risk return profile compared to LAIF. And so that means an additional level of diversification. And I'm just going to walk through, these 8 or 9 parameters. This is how I thought was a good way to compare the three programs. So both CLASS and CAMP are joint power authority programs. This is under a California government code. They are JPAs. And I'm looking at line item 1. And LAIF is offered by the state treasurer's office. CLASS and CAMP offer 2 different types of portfolios, both of which are AAA rated. They offer a same-day portfolio, which has a weighted average maturity of less than 60 days. So that's called California CLASS Prime. And then CAMP has a comparable portfolio called CAMP Pool, and that's for operating funds. Both of these programs also offer a different kind of portfolio for investing capital reserves and strategic reserves, and that has a higher weighted average to maturity. So that's for CLASS, it's called enhanced cash, and then for CAMP, it's called CAMP term. And if you look at yield, so if you look at the yields for the different programs, both class and camp have a slightly higher yield, 5.4 versus the 4.36 that LAIF has. So there's a 1%, those yields are 1% higher. And there are fees that both class and camp programs, I think that's 10 basis points. So that comes to about 0.1%. But the yield that you see here is net of those fees. So that 5.4% is that 0.1% is already netted out. Classes managed by public trust advisors and camp by PFM Asset Management. PFM Asset Management, though they're pretty big in the public investment space. And LAIF obviously is with the State Treasurer's Office.
That's a good chart, by the way. Thank
Yes.
you.
Very
Thank
helpful.
you. And then the next slide, we can get to it, that provides, this might be a little hard to see, but I wanted to get a sense of the composition of the portfolio. The top one is LAIF, and then the bottom two are camp and class. And the big red that you see on the top pie chart, that's treasuries. So for LAIF, they're investing most of their assets in treasuries and government agencies. And government agencies could be like Freddie Mae, Fannie Mae, those big agencies. Whereas for class and camp, now again, these are much smaller portfolios. Camp is investing in the repo market, the repurchase agreement market, and then certificates of participation. And then class is investing a big chunk of their portfolio in asset-backed securities and certificates of participation. Now, both these portfolios have a AAA rating, so the kind of assets that go into these portfolios need to have a very high credit rating. And so, for instance, for the repo asset class, those would be with banks, like big banks like Bank of America or Chase, like the top 5 banks. And the commercial paper would be like the Toyotas of the world or the John Deere's, companies with very high credit rating. And obviously, these assets need to satisfy the investment guidelines that are needed for putting together these portfolios. So I think so that's a broad overview of the 3 programs. If the committee were to recommend making these 2 programs part of the investment portfolio, then staff would amend the current investment policy Exhibit A. And then right now, Exhibit A, so staff is proposing that the maximum amount of the district portfolio that can be invested in either of these 2 programs is 30%. That's a high level of internal control. We can start off as a pilot and then see how it goes. So the first step would be to amend the policy if the committee so desires. And then the day-to-day operating decision on whether to use these programs could rest with staff. And that would depend on the return and risk considerations and the evolving market and the returns. So that's a summary. And in case you're wondering why, how come these programs have a slightly higher yield, that's mostly because they are investing, their weighted average maturity is smaller than LAIF. In that first slide, LAIF has a VAM, like a weighted average maturity of 230 days, and they have 60 days. And this depends on the yield curve without making it too complex. But if the yield curve is inverted or flat, and you're getting higher yields on the 60-day treasuries, then a portfolio that is higher, has a 60-day portfolio, has a VAM of 60, would give a higher yield compared to LAIF. So I hope that gives you, a good picture about these 2 programs.
No, good. And I'm glad to see the recommendation to add them to the list. I'm not suggesting we'd be investing in them yet because that just takes some time, but I'm glad to see them because they're public agency inspired and managed investment options and or pools. I had one other question about the size of each of the firms, class versus class, and the other one called, so what's the other one called?
Camp.
Camp. So one is in the hundreds of millions, 3.5. I mean, 350 million is one, that's the class one.
Mhm.
The other one is either much higher or much lower. How did I read this? Is it 18 million?
Sorry, which page number are you
I'm
reading?
on the last page of your short, the short, the tiny printed version. There's a very top line on that. Oh, page 68. I'm sorry, I do see it.
68.
Page number.
There you go, George.
I mean, did I see 18 billion? Is that how I read that?
I'm trying to see.
It's
what
just
you're saying.
net assets. It's just a report as of the end of March. So page 68, it's this camp one. And the net assets at the very top in the center of the page.
It's in millions. So that's
So millions is it?
144 times 1 million.
Okay, so it's 18 million. Is that right?
So I would add 6 zeros behind that.
So it's a billion then?
Yes.
Okay, I ended up calling it a billion when I thought, I better check that. So that's a huge fund. then.
Yeah, considering that they started in 1989, they've been around for a while, and a lot of cities seem to be using CAMP, and so that makes sense because a class started in 2022, and they're fairly small, and
Mhm.
so this makes intuitive sense.
And CAMP was started by Public Financial Management, which is a municipal advisory firm
Oh,
that also does like bond deals. So right now, for the airport terminal, their financial advisor is PFM. And so they have a whole bunch of services that they bring to municipalities. And so once this fund was created, it was a natural for them to recommend the pooled investment fund to their clients. And so they've been at it for decades. And they even, for a while, were putting bond proceeds. So you do your borrowing,
oh.
but you're drawing it down over 36 months,
Mhm.
putting bond proceeds into CAMP and so forth. So they've married the kind of the advisory side with the investment side.
And create an option for short terms.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, anyway, I'm glad to see them in the portfolio. I mean, we haven't approved it yet, but I'm glad to see the recommendation that way. Action can come later, but this is the first step. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I do too. So I think we should take this to the board. I noticed in the list of participants, it includes Marina Coast Water District is one of a number of water districts.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, they've come to the special districts quarterly meetings and pitched themselves, so which is why we reacted to it. So now you can tell your counterparts that
We're in.
we've taken a step.
We've joined the family. Well, I'll move approval of this. I know I initiated a lot of
Well,
this.
how are you gonna introduce this to the board? You're gonna make this a action item?
Yeah, I think it is right now.
Something like this, I wouldn't want to see it on consent
No, it's an action item.
because it's a big change
Hmm.
and if y'all recommend it, I think it's good on the financial side, but I'd just like to make sure that the public know what we're doing and the rest of the board know
Yes,
what they're getting themselves in. So,
yeah,
okay.
I agree. But that's what you
Okay.
intended, right? To take it to-
Yes, any thing that requires discussion or requires, broader transparency, yes, those. would be
Okay,
action
as
items.
long as we're not trying to slip it through on consent.
No, you won't.
Is that what consent is all about? Slipping it through?
Slipping it through,
Well, I moved. Was there a second? I didn't catch it.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Did
I
you second?
Okay, okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 3-0. So.
So items 6 and 7 are informational only, but if you have questions, we can take them. Otherwise, we'll focus on the board meeting agenda. And do you have an updated one? Yeah. So from the agenda that's in your packet, we've added one addition. I've got one. Yep.
Just before we leave these final reports, I was glad to see the Measure J process retitled as well as broken down into segments of, periods of time. And it just makes it a lot easier to understand and keep track. I'm just glad to see that. Okay, so now we're talking about.
Yeah, so on the agenda, there's been an addition, item 11. And this is because a year ago, we adopted an urgency ordinance, and then we thought we would have a cleanup ordinance that could include the final post 1 year. But we didn't. We've not had a cleanup ordinance, and so we need to renew this emergency ordinance. So that'll be described by Stephanie Locke during the meeting. The other things I want to draw your attention to.
Just before we leave that, does it continue to be an urgency ordinance? Hasn't it settled down to kind of normal?
I believe it's a separate new
urgency
ordinance. So
Okay.
it'll have its own limited life,
Okay,
replacing the prior one that had a limited life.
okay.
And then I know it's on their to-do list, but we need a cleanup ordinance for a variety of other
It's still on the
things.
to-do list.
Yeah, it's still on. the
Okay.
to-do list.
Well, I guess we're gonna have to put a deadline on it.
Yeah, I think it's just because we haven't had enough stuff come up that's worth putting into a cleanup ordinance.
Well,
Well, then it
Yeah.
should be easier.
thank you. And you get a little bit and you get rid of it, and, you know.
Well, so interestingly, we need to bring an ordinance for the allocation of water.
Mhm.
I suspect that'll be a standalone because it's just about one thing. But there's some things we'd like to do with our appeals process and our fines and penalties and some other spot things that you'll probably see a cleanup ordinance this calendar year before the year's over.
Well, if you're working on the penalties and since I came onto this board, I've been curious about how enforcement works. And I've asked a few questions, but I don't really have a good picture of how, enforcement,
Yeah.
what do we do so many inspections and, 60% are found to be compliant. What happens in,
And not to get too far off track, but we do file a lot of notices of non-compliance.
mhm.
And when you have that on your deed, you tend to want to clean that up, and so that gathers people's attention. But we have some non-compliance that doesn't have a fine or a penalty. So we have some that eventually we can lien. You post the names in the paper and you put an actual financial lien on the property. So that has the double impact of you have a notice of non-compliance and then you get a lien filed through the tax collector's office.
Yeah.
But then we have some penalties that don't have a financial incentive that we're actually going to come to council at one point here in the near future to figure out if we can come up with a system of fines for those kind of non-compliance so that then we have an unpaid bill that we can then lien
So it
through the tax collector.
Just suggesting at the board meeting where we address this issue might be a good opportunity to give some description of the various enforcement tools that the district has and
Yeah.
is using.
Um,
And if in your experience, you feel like any of them have proved to be not effective, then we can think about how to change them.
And the other things on the agenda I want to highlight or direct your attention to, item 7 will be what should have been mid-year, but now it's the 8th month of the year. Update on strategic goals, which was last discussed during our board workshop over in Asilomar. And then item 12 is what was just discussed. You can see it's on as an action item. Item 13 is the job description, and I'm not gonna, Nichelle, I'm not gonna see any written comments. It was just what you and I talked about last week, right? And then Simona sent today.
I'll send you something.
Okay, because Simona finished today, so yeah, okay,
You'll get it in the next 2 hours.
great. The discussion items, 14 is just an update. I think most of you have now seen the online weekly article about the meeting they didn't get to
They
attend, but they seemingly covered pretty well. The Seaside Basin, we've discussed this one offline. You guys were both on the last Seaside Water Master. We may defer that one. I've got to talk to John after this meeting. We may not be ready, but the subject would then just move to September. And the water allocation, that's basically the Water Demand Committee's.
Yeah, I was still looking for that.
Yeah. And let's see, today is, so probably next week, we'll send out another meeting invite. The first meeting invite landed about a week and a half ago, calling on, I think September 12th is the first meeting with the 6 cities, the county, and the military, so, and the airport. So there will be movement.
So that particular point, the allocation is really to describe the process or the
Yeah.
dates coming up and so on. Not,
Yeah, and
are you going to put any numbers out there yet, or?
no.
Okay.
So today, the county just released their new draft housing element. So we're digesting that. They took out quite a number of properties that were in our service area, but there's still big numbers there. And so when we get to that point of here's what population says, here's what job growth says, and then here's what housing says, I'm trying to bring those two together. We'll know probably at the end of this week what the new numbers look like. So sometime next week we'll have numbers, but I don't think I don't think we want to release anything because we need, so you may recall from water demand, we are going to tell staffs how we got there so that then their council members and mayors can go, I don't want to know right now. I want the assurance that my people know how you got there. Because there's a lot of detail to it that we're not going to spend the time with the policymakers going through the detail. So we want to make sure all that detail is correct. But we also, we're now talking about in the ordinance saying specific things like this is a deposit to your account. It's not your water. It's the cities. It's not wet water that we're giving the cities that they can now hoard. But we want to encourage them to utilize their water and not prioritize for only specific uses, to not hoard their water. If there's water that remains, and to not charge for the water because it's an essential service. And it's been talked about. A couple of different jurisdictions from time to time have said, oh, we should be charging. Well, then you're creating another fee, an impact fee basically for any future growth. And so I think we need to discuss those as we bring the first reading of the ordinance forward. What are the conditions we're putting on this? Because I do believe the cities mistakenly think like we're giving them water. And we want them to start thinking about it more in terms of, no, we're your bank and you have an account with us and we will debit your account when you want a building project built. They'll come for the water permit, we'll debit your account, that it is an account with the district. And therefore they can't create different playing fields from city to city to city, or at least we're going to try to discourage them from doing so.
But it's a planning number for them.
Yeah, but that's where it's going to get messy because, we've looked at the county's housing numbers. So when you think about the county, and they're our best bad example, they can only grow inside Pebble Beach, inside Carmel Valley, or the Highway 68 corridor out here near us. some of those parcels don't have services. So when they say, we want to build 96 housing units, okay, how are you connecting to sewer? How are you connecting to water? They haven't answered some of those questions yet. And there's little island parcels that there may be a willing developer, but you're not connected to anything. And so are we going to start a process by which we're going to encourage Cal-Am to annex new parcels before we've even resolved the moratorium and the cease and desist order? I mean, there's just unthought out things behind these numbers. So that being said, we look at the counties, and when we did it before, we said they're not going to grow any faster than, and I think we picked like an average between Pacific Grove and Carmel, some built out cities. And it came out to like 10.2% growth rate over a 25-year period. But then they came back with our housing numbers and they put 3,000 housing units in, which was like a 300% growth rate in a much shorter period of time. So we're not going to give them water for 3,000 housing units, and so they'll look at it and they go, how can we ever build all our housing? Because you didn't give us enough water. And we'll say, if you build the first 10%, come back to us. And that's really where we want to be, is in a position to see who's really supporting their housing plans. In the past, this board has succumbed to the city's pressure and said, okay, we were holding some district reserve back, but you need it, you want it, here, take it all. And then there was nothing left to do. Well, so today, City of Seaside has water, City of Monterey has none. But we're not in a position to say, hey, Seaside, or even the county, you have 12 acre feet that you've not used. We're about to allocate you new water, and you don't know who the 12 acre feet is allocated to. You've lost your list. So there's nobody at the county who really knows, did we allocate that 12? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's fully allocated. Well, to whom? And seriously, I'm not kidding you very much on this one. We've from time to time said, give the homeowner his little 1/4 of an acre foot. You've got 12.5 acre feet that you're not utilizing, and they say, oh, I'm told that's allocated. And then you say, to whom? And they don't have an answer. So anyway, we're going to clean up a lot of that stuff. But that's where you'll start to see pushback. When we tell the City of Seaside, your old allocation is gone, here's your new allocation. And they'll say something like, well, no, I want this on top of what I used to have. No, it's a fresh start, So anyway.
So say again, Dave, when you're meeting with the
12th of September, I think, 9 to 11.
And some of the pack can sit on that, can't they?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, just
It's
make
not
it,
exclusive, and
just make it.
we sent invites to every city manager plus the bigger cities that have planning directors.
Mhm.
But they may just send their planning director. Others may want to be here just to find out what's going on.
Yeah, and y'all put me on that list of the day of the Zoom, the Water Demand Committee, if they want to listen in.
Yeah.
Because I want to listen in on all the discussions so I can hear it myself on what they're saying. So,
would we be able to listen in?
Yeah, I think we could do that.
Yeah.
Just send it.
yeah, as long as we're not commenting and,
Yeah.
Yeah, just silently.
yeah, so
Yeah, I'd
I
like
just like to listen in on and hear it when you break it to them.
Yeah, see what their concerns are, see what they understand, misunderstand.
Yeah, I think Sarah will have to talk about logistics, because it's not really meant to be a hybrid meeting, but we could, we set up the big rectangle, and we can make it hybrid just so people can listen in.
Yeah, one-way hybrid.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so.
That's it.
Yeah, and I would think the water forum and the CDO restrictions are key to this going forward. Absolutely key.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit frustrating, the message that we got in the water forum when Calum basically doubled down on their, we're not interested in helping lift the CDO unless we've got a clear path to our desal plant. Among other things, where they said, if you facing me, drop your lawsuit against the Coastal Commission, there are a few other choice things. And it's just like this willingness to keep a moratorium in place when jobs and housing starts are on everybody's mind. It's a little unseemly.
So if there's no more business before the committee's adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
But I did want to ask the GM about